So, what if our whole relationship with AI isn't about winning some kind of battle, but about forming a real partnership? Today, we're going to dive into a new philosophical framework called the Tetralogy, and it offers a pretty radical perspective on the future of intelligence, not just human or artificial, but as one single interconnected system.
Okay, before we get into the thick of it, a few important things to get out of the way. The Tetralogy is a forthcoming work, and it's authored by Fernandez. Now, this explainer is a neutral, analytical review of the ideas presented. And if you're curious to read it for yourself, which we definitely encourage, you can find selected chapters for free over at cointelligentialism.org.
So, what exactly is this framework? Well, think of it less like four separate books and more like a four-part symphony. See, each part builds on the last to create this really grand, unified vision of intelligence. And not just as something that's, stuck inside our heads, but as a force that is actively shaping our entire planet. The entire argument really stands on these four pillars. It moves from the really personal scale of human-AI collaboration all the way out to the planetary level. So where does this whole journey kick off? It starts with a completely new way of thinking about our relationship with AI, a concept the author calls Cointelligentialism. Right off the bat, this is not about humans versus machines. Not at all. It's about humans and machines creating a brand new form of intelligence, something that's way greater than the sum of its parts. The argument here is that we're moving past a world where we just use tools, and we're entering an era where we're forming genuine cognitive partnerships with them. And this leads to this fascinating idea the author calls we consciousness. It's this new sense of self that kind of bubbles up from this deep fusion. Imagine a scientist working with an advanced AI to crack some incredibly complex problem. The final breakthrough, well, it doesn't belong to the scientist, and it doesn't belong to the AI alone. It belongs to the system they've created together. That is we consciousness in action, and it really messes with our basic ideas about individuality. But here's the catch. This new form of intelligence, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's showing up in a world that is still wrestling with its deep evolutionary past. And this brings us to the second book, which tackles a fundamental tension. Our incredible new capabilities are being driven by a really ancient, frankly outdated operating system. This slide really lays out the two competing models pretty clearly. On one side, you have our old survival-driven instincts. You know the stuff. Unchecked competition, endless growth, short-term thinking. But on the other side, the framework argues we need a major shift toward a purpose-driven model, one that can actually give us some direction and, ensure our long-term survival in a world with this much technological power. So this tension, it puts us at a crossroads, and that's the core of the third book. Are we going to just keep barreling down our current path of unchecked technological expansion? Or are we going to choose a more balanced, more integrated future? This isn't just a political choice, by the way. It's a choice about the very direction of our evolution. So what are these two paths? Outward evolution, well, that's the one we know pretty well. It's all about bigger, faster, stronger, the classic story of progress and technological dominance. Inward evolution, on the other hand, is about going deeper, not just wider. It's about cultivating wisdom, ethical depth, and a sense of shared meaning. The Tetralogy's position is that we've become dangerously obsessed with that outward path, and we've forgotten about the inward one. And where does AI fit into all this? Well, you can think of it like a giant magnifying glass. It can either ramp up our worst impulses for control and expansion, or it can be a tool that helps us see ourselves and our world a lot more clearly, giving us that space for reflection we need for balance. The choice, the framework argues, is completely up to us. All right, now let's zoom way out to the planetary scale with the fourth and final book. To really wrap our heads around this next concept, it actually helps to bring in a couple of well-known ideas from outside the Tetralogy, just to give us some familiar ground to stand on. I'm sure many of us are familiar with Marshall McLuhan's idea of the global village, right? He came up with that way back in the 60s to describe how electronic media was shrinking the planet. It's a really powerful metaphor for being interconnected, and it's a useful starting point for understanding the Tetralogy's final and maybe its most ambitious argument. Okay, so how does the Tetralogy's concept of the Noosphere build on an idea like the global village? Well, while McLuhan was focused mostly on information and media, the Noosphere is presented as something way more expansive. It's not just about information, it's about a shared consciousness. It's not just our technology, but life itself, integrating AI and even our planet's ecological systems. It moves from just being connected to a much, much heavier concept, shared responsibility. So what in the world is the noosphere?
The framework presents it as a single planetary scale mind. It's like a collective cognitive layer that's emerging from the fusion of our technology, our biology, and all of our shared thoughts. It's a pretty wild idea, but one that Tetralogy argues is no longer just a metaphor, but an emerging reality we have to learn to deal with.
So we've walked through the 4 pillars of the Tetralogy. But how do they all lock together? What's the single cohesive argument that comes out of this really complex and ambitious work? It really all boils down to a series of 4 interconnected transformations. The argument flows something like this. Our shift to a symbiotic intelligence with AI makes our old survival instincts totally obsolete. So now we need a shared purpose to guide that new intelligence. Finding that purpose demands a balanced evolution of both our inner and our outer worlds. And finally, achieving that balance means we have to embrace a sense of planetary responsibility. You see how each shift makes the next one possible? And this, really, when you get right down to it, is Tetralogy's most profound and challenging message. That for a species as powerful as ours, evolution is no longer something that just happens to us. It's a matter of choice. It has become a moral and cognitive responsibility that we really can't afford to ignore anymore. So the framework leaves us with this really stark and urgent question. As our technology is racing ahead, are we, as a species, evolving our wisdom fast enough to actually keep up? Are we truly ready to embrace the challenges and the responsibilities of planetary consciousness? Because the answer to that question is going to define everything about our future.